Hello, and welcome back to Storytime with Eric Zimmer, where we last left off in the Mighty Dozen. And James's team escaped from Area 86 with the help of Eddie, Peter, and Clara. James is attacking downtown Reno, and Sergeant Hicks, along with Mayor Goodman, are trying to head to the scene of the crime as fast as they could. An epic battle is approaching fast. Ready to know what happens next? Alright, let's begin. Chapter 12. The team encounters James. Back in the rock cave, everybody was listening to the last bit of the recording that Eddie had unknowingly made of James's monstrous transformation, which ended with him roaring with laughter and disappearing into the night. Eddie then pressed the stop button and put it back in his pocket as he, Peter, and Clara looked up at the Mighty Nine. All of them took a few moments to put together everything they had just heard. "You know," said Reginald slowly, "there's a giant orange monster out there who looks a lot like Jimmy." "It is Jimmy!" cried Eddie, Peter, and Clara in unison. There was a long, nasty silence. The reactions of the team were remarkable as they realized what they were up against. Richard and Christy, in particular, were so white in the face they looked ready to faint, but Carly's reaction was the worst of all. She was shaking uncontrollably, she looked ready to collapse, and she had the eyes of a damned soul, as she realized it was mostly her fault, if not all her fault, that James ultimately transformed into a monster. "So James did have a superpower after all," said Christy, shocked. "Unlike the rest of us, his power simply needed more time to fully develop," said Reginald. "And it wasn't until he completely succumbed to his anger and hatred that he fully transformed into a Hulk-like monster," said Gary. "We gotta do something before the army tries to take him down," Joey cried out in desperation. "Carly? Carly, what's wrong?" Richard asked, turning to Carly. It was at that moment everybody turned their attention to Carly, who was still shaking with fright. Her brilliant green eyes, wide with horror, were suddenly full of tears, and before anyone could say anything to her, she burst out sobbing uncontrollably. The others stared in complete shock as she became hysterical. "What have I done? It's all my fault!" "Carly, calm down," said Christy, slightly frightened. "I've turned the only man I've ever loved into a monster." "Catherine," Richard began. "Why did I have to open my big stupid mouth and insult him for his appearance? Why did I drive him away when we needed him most? When I needed him most? Why? Why?" "Carly," Frank said, petrified. "Why?" Carly shrieked in despair. "Catherine!" Christy shouted. She slapped Carly across the face as hard as she could. The others were very surprised, but it stopped Carly's hysterical attack. Christy put a hand on her shoulder. "Sorry, you were getting hysterical," she said quietly. "Thanks, Christiana," sniffled Carly. Breathing heavily, Carly turned to face the others, who were still stunned by what they had just witnessed. "All I ever did was make fun of James, and yet he still promised to help us. We have to help him." "And so we shall," Richard proclaimed valiantly. "He'd do the same for any of us," agreed Pedro. "For the first time in my life, in a long time that is, I feel genuinely brave," cried Frank boldly. "Come on, everybody," said Richard with his game-faced arm. "We gotta find James before the army does and kills him." "We want to go with you," said Eddie. "No," yelled Carly. Eddie, Peter, and Clara were taken aback, but they also refused to back down. "We're all in this together," said Peter indignantly. "Jimmy let us help him," said Eddie. "Surely you'd let us help you guys too." "No offense to any of you, but we have superpowers and you don't," said Frank. "And besides, it's way too dangerous." "Jimmy wouldn't have been able to create the superpower antidote without our help," Clara yelled defiantly. And we promised him we would help you too. Now why won't you let us?" At first no one knew how to answer Clara's question, for they were taken aback at her outburst and saw her breathing hard. Finally, Christy knelt down and looked up at Clara, putting a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Look, Clara, sweetheart, we appreciate everything you guys have done to help James, but Frankie's right. It's way too dangerous. It's just—" She became deadly serious. "We just don't want to see you guys get killed." "But Jimmy's still angry and vengeful about what you did to him. He'll kill all of you if he gets the chance," Eddie cried, horrified. Richard sighed sadly. "Then we will have paid for our mistake." The others also looked solemn at Richard, knowing their upcoming mission will probably cost all their lives. Eddie, Peter, and Clara, knowing this, looked devastated. "But, guys," Peter's voice broke. Carly smiled appreciatively. "Listen, Eddie, Peter, Clara, whatever happens to us all, you have done your best. I know James probably said this to you, but it was an honor to work with you three. And thank you for helping us out of Area 86. The team smiled as they bowed respectively to the three kids, who bowed in return, though they looked like they were about to cry. "All right, Mighty Nine, let's ride!" Carly yelled valiantly. Everybody made their battle cries, and using their superpowers, headed out of the rock cave and into the desert to look for James, leaving Eddie, Peter, and Clara alone, looking sad and downhearted. A moment later, Joey came back. "Don't worry, guys," he said. "We'll call you if you need backup." Just then Pedro came back and threw his outstretched arms around Joey. "Joey, let's go! Vámonos!" "Whoa!" Joey cried as he was pulled along. Again, Eddie, Peter, and Clara looked depressed as they watched the team go. "Well, I don't care what they say," said Eddie, breaking the silence. "We've got to help them first." "You're right," said Peter. "The antidote can wait. This is more important." "Come on, guys," said Clara. "We gotta go find Jimmy." Without a moment to lose, the three of them ran across the mouth of the cave and out into the open desert. Meanwhile, James was still chasing after the fighter jets. But even at his size and speed, he couldn't catch them. He stopped, running to catch his breath. "Puny jets, get away! I crush 'em later! Me thirsty!" Fortunately, there was a fresh water hole nearby, so James went over and began drinking. As he did so, a reflection of a beautiful woman appeared on the surface. The woman's reflection, who happened to be of James's late mother Vivienne, looked at James and shook her head sadly before dissolving. She's always looking down on her one and only son. Satisfied that he quenched his thirst, James stood upright and wiped his mouth with a satisfied smile. Just then he got blasted again on his backside. Once again it had no effect on him whatsoever, but he still turned around angrily to see what was going on. In the distance, but getting closer, were several army tanks, the closest of which had the general. "There he is, men!" Henderson was shouting. "Take him down!" The men started firing at James, and though many of the blasts missed him, the ones that got him once more had no effect. Fuming, James approached the army and grabbed one of the machine tanks. He picked it up like a baseball bat, but not before the soldiers in it jumped out and ran for their lives. "Batter up!" James grinned evilly. Seeing what he was about to do, the soldiers and two other machine tanks jumped out and made a run for it, just as James struck both tanks with the tank he had in his hand. By this point, the other machine tanks had stopped firing, and even Henderson himself was looking terrified. "He's too strong! Look out!" At that moment, James threw the machine tank in his hand directly at the general's tank. Though it had avoided hitting anyone, several soldiers, including Henderson, went flying as their tank got destroyed from the impact. No one was killed, but it took the soldiers and Henderson more than a few moments to get to their feet. By the time they did, they saw that James had disappeared out of sight. Henderson was furious and grabbed his walkie-talkie from his pocket. "Call off your soldiers, General!" Henderson and the surrounding soldiers turned around to see Carly flying confidently towards them. She landed about 10 feet in front of Henderson. "You!" Henderson cried. "How did you get out of there?" "Never mind that," said Carly urgently. "We can help. Mighty Nine, assemble." One by one, the rest of the team appeared or landed on either side of Carly. All except Joey, who came up the rear, breathing heavily. Everyone glanced over at him. "Can I at least get roller skates, please?" he asked. He panted breathlessly. Carly rolled her eyes in annoyance. Henderson turned to his men. "You may fire when ready." "Wait!" Henderson groaned. "Lower your guns." "What do you monsters want?" Carly took a deep breath. "My name is Catherine Nordberg. I was sent along with my partner James Reitherman to investigate the glowing meteor at Pyramid Lake. We recruited these suitin' mutants along for the ride since they went to camp with us near the site of the crash. When we went to investigate, the meteor exploded and somehow gave us superpowers. That's why I have super strength and can fly. It's why they," Carly gestured to the rest of the team, "are able to do what their powers entail them. And it's why James Reitherman is now a raging monster in the veins of the Incredible Hulk. It will take those with superpowers to fight others with superpowers. So unless you want your entire army slaughtered, General, I suggest you let us handle him. And if you promise not to lock us up again once this is over, we'll compensate and repay the damage we've caused to Area 86. There was a long silence as the soldiers looked at one another and thought it over, murmuring to each other. Henderson, however, normally would be insulted to be spoken to like this, especially by a woman, given the chauvinistic pig he was. Then again, if he did lose his entire army to James, he would be stripped of his title and have his reputation ruined, which was something he couldn't afford to lose. "I guess I don't have a choice in the matter," he sighed heavily. "It's a deal. He's all yours, Mighty Nine." "Thank you, sir," said Carly. With that, she took to the sky, as did the rest of the team with the exception of Richard, who ran super speed on the ground, and Joey, who was hanging precariously onto Gary's hoverboard. Yes, Gary traveled by hoverboard. It came with his superpower. The army watched the team go in admiration, even the general. "Brave soul," said Henderson. But then, "Hey, if we get lucky, maybe they'll destroy each other." Some of the soldiers nodded in amusement as Henderson continued to watch the Mighty Nine disappear into the distance, laughing sinisterly to himself. About 5 minutes later, Carly was doing a thorough aerial search, spotted gigantic